You sit huddled near the small fire at the heart of your cave, the orange light flickering over damp stone walls. Outside, a winter storm howls through the night, and frigid gusts snake into the cavern's entrance. Each breath you exhale turns to mist and frost in the air. You pull your thick fur cloak tighter around your shoulders, feeling the coarse hairs brush against your cheeks. The cloak is heavy, made from the hide of a great stag you hunted moons ago. Its warmth is a lifesaver on a night like this. Beyond the fire's glow, you can see the rest of your family curled under piles of animal pelts, rising and falling lumps in the darkness as they sleep through the bitter cold. The wind outside rises to a furious howl, and a flurry of snow rides in on the draft, swirling white in the flickering light. A chill bites at any strip of exposed skin. You instinctively tuck your hands deeper into the fur draped across your body. Only your face remains uncovered, and you can feel the sting of cold on your nose and ears. But the rest of you is cocooned in layers of hide and fur. Under the outer cloak, you wear a tunic of soft, pliable doe leather, and beneath that your skin is wrapped in whatever warmth you can muster around. Your legs are snug leggings, fashioned from reindeer hide, and on your feet you wear boots lined with fur and stuffed with dried grasses for insulation. From head to toe you are swathed in the harvested warmth of animals, a second skin that shields you from a world of ice. You shift slightly, careful not to let any part of your body slip outside your coverings. The rough, woolly rhino hide you laid on the cave floor as a mat insulates you from the ground's icy bite. Every now and then, a gust of wind pushes its way past the hide curtain hung at the cave's mouth. Heavy, tanned skin stretched on a frame of branchesto block out the worst of the weather. The curtain flaps, and you hear the sharp hiss of snow hitting hot embers as a few flakes reach the fire. Shadows dance wildly on the walls, painting a moving picture of you. A lone figure braving the dead of winter, clad in primitive furs, yet surviving against the odds. You inhale deeply and catch the familiar sense of your winter abode. Wood smoke, animal hides, and the faint musky smell of dried herbs stored in a niche of the cave. These aromas cling to your furs and hair, a constant reminder of the life you maintain here against the cold. The smoke from countless fires has stained the cave's ceiling overhead, leaving it blackened in patches like a primitive painting. By firelight, those soot-dark shapes can play tricks on the eyes, sometimes resembling the outlines of roaming bison or stag, perhaps a coincidence of smoke, or perhaps echoes of an ancestor's art. Such thoughts flicker through your mind as you keep your vigil by the flames, every sense attuned to the environment. You rub your hands together within your fur-lined mittens. The mittens are large and clumsy, but wonderfully warm. They're essentially small pouches made from the fur of a fox, pulled over your hands. When you need more dexterity, you slip them off, letting them dangle from the thin leather cord looped around your neck so they won't get lost or blow away. For now, you keep them on, savoring how they trap the heat of your fingers. Above you, on the cave ceiling, stalactites glitter with frost. You can't see them directly in the dim light, but you know they're there during the day. Weak winter sunlight sometimes catches on the ice crystals overhead like stars. Nights are long and unforgiving in this season. But inside your layers of fur and hide, there is a pocket of warmth, a small sanctuary for your body. The fire provides some heat, yes, but it's your clothing that truly keeps you alive when the wind's knife-like edges slice through the dark. You glance at your sleeping family. To your left, your mate lies under a thick bearskin, only a tuft of hair and the tip of a nose visible. Curled against her is your youngest child, bundled in a patchwork fur wrap stitched from hair pelts. You remember how carefully you and your mate sewed those soft pelts together to make a tiny winter coat for the baby, who now sleeps soundly, unaware of the deadly chill just beyond the furs. Near them is your older child, a boy on the cusp of adolescence, draped in a cloak made of wolf pelts. He insisted on the wolf fur taken from a predator you and he trapped together, believing it would give him courage and strength. You smile faintly at the memory of his pride when he first put it on. The fire pops, a log collapsing into glowing coals, and you stir to add another piece of wood. As you move, your breath momentarily catches at the shock of the cold away from the fire. But the moment is brief. Your reindeer, hide leggings, and fur-wrapped feet protect you from the chill of the stone floor. Still, you move quickly, not wanting the cold to seep in through any gap. You grab a nearby lodget's surface dried earlier in the day near the flame sand, place it atop the embers. Sparks whirl up, illuminating your hands and forearms, which are covered in the fur-lined sleeves of your tunic. The sleeves are cinched at your wrists with strips of leather to keep cold air from sneaking up your arms. It's a simple trick, but an important one. Any opening in your outfit is a weakness where the winter can attack. As the fire grows again, you feel a wave of heat on your face. You close your eyes for a moment, letting that heat soak into you. Then you wrap your cloak more tightly and settle back against the cave wall. The worst of the storm has yet to pass, you suspect. The winds have been howling for hours, and through the muffled roar, you occasionally hear the distant crack of a tree branch breaking under the weight of ice, or the unsettling growl of some animal braving the night. A pack of wolves, perhaps, their cries carried on the wind. But here in your cave, you and your kin are as safe as you can be, protected by stone, by fire, and by the carefully prepared skins that clothe each one of you. How different this is from the warmth of summer, you think fleetingly. In the warm season, one can sleep with limbs bare, cooled by gentle breezes. Clothing then is minimal, perhaps just a light wrap, or none at all by the fire. But in winter, everything changes. The world becomes hostile to a bare human body. The cold would steal the breath from your lungs and the life from your flesh if you gave it the chance. You shudder, not from cold, but from the thought of that deadly chill. And you pull your cloak even closer, feeling gratitude for the deer that provided it. This is not the first winter you have faced, nor will it be the last. You have learned from a young age that preparation is the only way to endure times like these. Surviving the winter begins long before the first snow falls. Your gaze drifts to the bundle of tools neatly arranged near the cave wall. Flint scrapers, stone blades, bone needles and awls, coils of sinew for thread, and a few sharpened antler points. Each has its role in the story of these life-saving garments you wear. Your eyes rest on a particular bone needle, its surface smooth and shiny from use. You recall the countless stitches it has sewn, the careful work by firelight as you piece together furs to make clothes that would stand between your family and certain death by exposure. As the storm rages outside, you allow your mind to wander back to those days of preparation. With the present moment secure, your family warm, the fire alive, the fur around you thick and comforting, you can indulge in recollection. You remember the feel of warmer sun on your skin and the turning of the seasons when you began the long, difficult task of ensuring you would all have the protection needed for when the world turned to ice. In the dancing shadows of the cave, you close your eyes and let the memories come, carrying you from this frigid night back to a milder time when the great task of making winter clothing first began. It was early autumn, when the leaves were just beginning to turn gold and red, and the chill in the air was a whisper of what was to come. You remember standing at the edge of the forest that afternoon, scanning the distant valley for movement. The sun hung low, but still held some warmth, and you felt it on your face even as a brisk breeze tugged at your hair. You were not alone. At your side was your hunting partner, a lifelong friend from your band. Both of you were lightly clad, then compared to now. You wore a simple tunic of leather and carried only a fur wrap slung over your shoulder for the cool evening ahead. In your hand, you gripped a sturdy spear, tipped with carved stone. The memory of adrenaline comes back as you recall why you were there, waiting in tense silence. You were hunting not just for food, but for skins-thick winter skins from a herd of deer that migrated through the valley each fall. After hours of patient tracking, you spotted them, a small group of megaloceros, the giant deer of the Ice Age, recognizable even from afar by the towering antlers of the males. They moved slowly, grazing on the frost-touched grasses. Their shaggy winter coats were already growing in, dense and deep brown. Those coats were exactly what your family needed. Food was plentiful enough, with preserved dried meat and smoked fish stored for winter. But without new furs to replace worn-out ones, no amount of food would save you from freezing. So you and your companion had ventured out with a purpose that went beyond the hunt's usual stakes. You crouched low behind a thicket of scrubby pines. The air carried the earthy scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke from your home camp. Each breath you took mingled excitement with a slight edge of fear. You knew that a misstep could result in an empty hunt, or worse, an injury far from shelter. But necessity steeled your nerves. You ran a hand over a coil of sinew rope at your belt, checking that it was there to lash any kills to a sled. At your side, your friend silently notched a flint-tipped arrow into his bow. A new bow he'd made that summer from yew wood. Bows were rare and precious, a newer innovation among your people, but he was skilled with it. You would spear if the opportunity arose. He would shoot. Between you, you hoped to fell at least one large deer, maybe two, to yield hides ample enough for coats and blankets. The deer herd moved closer, unaware of the two predators lying in wait. You and your friend exchanged a quick hand signal, honed through years of cooperative hunting. You would circle quietly to the right, downwind, while he remained where he was, hidden. The plan was to startle the herd in his direction, where he could take a shot at a prime targetado or a young stag whose hide would be manageable yet ample. Heart-pounding, you began to creep, each footfall carefully placed toe first to avoid snapping twigs. You kept low, using the terrain's dips and the cover of shrubs to mask your approach. As you neared the herd from the side, you could hear the animals' breaths and the soft crunch of their teeth tearing at plants. The largest stag, with antlers like an ancient tree's crown, snorted and pawed the ground, but he wasn't looking your way. When you reached a position as near as you dared, perhaps a dozen long strides from the closest doe you met your friend's gaze across the clearing. He was a statue among the leaves, bow drawn. You knew he could hold that tension only so long. It was time to act. With a sudden yell, you leapt up from cover, brandishing your spear and charging a few steps toward the herd. In that instant, the peaceful scene shattered. The deer's heads shot up, ears pivoting, and then their powerful legs sprang into motion. They bolted, exactly as you intended, away from your sudden appearance and toward your hidden companion. The great stag bellowed in alarm, herding his family away. As they fled past the copse where your friend was concealed, you saw him rise and let loose an arrow. A sharp whistling split the air. The arrow found its mark in a young deer, a yearling with a richly colored coat. The creature stumbled, faltered from the sudden wound in its flank. You shouted again and rushed forward to keep the herd moving, preventing them from gathering their wits. The others thundered away in a panic, disappearing into the tree line, but the injured one collapsed to its knees. Your friend burst from cover and loosed another arrow to ensure it was finished swiftly and humanely, then ran toward the downed animal. Within moments, you were at his side, the rest of the herd long gone over the ridge. The deer young dew lay still, the arrows having done their work quickly. You both paused, breathless, hearts racing not only from the chase but with a solemn respect. You knelt by the fallen creature and murmured a quiet word of thanks, a ritual of gratitude your people always offered to prey, acknowledging the life that would now sustain yours. The doe's dark eyes stared blankly at the sky, and you gently closed them with your hand. Almost immediately, you turned to the practical task at hand, for there was much to do before nightfall. The sun was already dipping, staining the sky with streaks of pink and gold. You and your friend worked in tandem, like two parts of a well-crafted tool. With a flint knife drawn from your belt, you began to skin the deer. Your friend held the carcass steady and helped pull the hide as you sliced carefully between skin and muscle. Steam rose from the warm body into the cold autumn air as you peeled back the hide. You had to be meticulous. A slip of the knife could gouge a hole in the pelt, and every inch was precious. The skin came away gradually, a gruesome yet necessary labor, revealing the venison beneath which would also be taken back for meat. But your focus was on that hide still wet, still carrying the animal's musky scent. It was the treasure you had come for, the future cloak or boots that might save someone's fingers, toes, or life in the coming freeze. Once freed, the hide was thick and heavy. You and your friends stretched it out on the ground, fur side down, and scraped off the remaining fat and flesh on the inside with your flint scrapers. Long, deliberate strokes, pushing away from your body, shearing greasy red remnants off the supple inner surface. This, too, had to be done with care. Leaving too much tissue would invite rot and make the tanning process harder. The sun continued to drop, and you worked by the waning light with determination. When at last the hide was reasonably clean of flesh, you rolled it up, flesh side in, and bound it with cords. It was too fresh to carry without preparation. It would need to be cured soon, but that would wait until you returned to camp. Besides, you had the meat and antlers to deal with. You carved and collected as much meat as you could carry, but prioritized certain parts. The fat from the deer would be especially useful. Fat could be rendered and used later in treating the hides or fueling lamps. The sinews, the very tendons that once moved the deer's limbs, you saved by carefully teasing them out, because once dried and split, they would become your sewing thread. Nothing of this creature would be wasted. By nightfall, you had the hide, several chunks of meat, and the long sinews all packed onto a rough hide stretcher, a kind of sled made from branches, and an old piece of leather you'd brought for this purpose. You also sawed off the sturdy leg bones and the antlers. The bones could be made into tools like needles and awls, and the antlers themselves might be carved into spear points or wedges. Burdens heavy, but hearts satisfied. You and your friend began the journey back to the rock shelter that your band was using as an autumn base, before you all moved into the deeper cave for winter. The hike was not short, and darkness enveloped the land fully. Under a moonless sky, you navigated by memory and starlight, occasionally using a resin torch for illumination in the densest woods. The forest was alive with night sounds, a distant owl's hoot, the rustling of small creatures in the underbrush. Each gust of wind showered dried leaves around you. You both were tired, muscles aching from the day's exertions. But every time you thought of slowing, the weight of the deer hide on the sled reminded you how vital it was to get it back and properly processed. A ruined hide from delay or scavengers would mean a lost opportunity for warmth. At last, near midnight, you saw the glow of fire through the trees. The rest of your band had kept a fire burning high, partly to guide you back and partly to ward off any curious predators drawn by the scent of blood in the air. When you emerged into the ring of light, a soft cheer went up from those who waited. Several silhouettes rose to greet you, among them your mate, who had doubtless been worried despite having faith in your skills, and an elder who oversaw much of the hide working in the group. They helped you unload the sled. Immediately, even though you were exhausted, the process continued. The fresh deer hide was unrolled by the fire. The elder, a wiry woman whose face was lined with decades of sun and wind, inspected it with a critical eye. She nodded in approval at the clean skinning job, then directed a younger teen to fetch the bags of dried moss and crushed bark. It was crucial to start curing the hide right away to prevent spoilage. At her word, you and others sprinkled the inside of the hide with handfuls of coarse salt and wood asha method, learned by trial and error to dry out the moisture. Salt was precious, scraped from evaporated spring water pools and traded for with distant kin, but it was worth using here. The elder also had you rub in some crushed oak bark on the inner surface. The bark, rich in tannins, helped to preserve the hide and would aid in making it durable and resistant to rot. You didn't know the chemistry, only that this was the way of your people. Oak bark for tanning, brains for softening, two gifts that would transform a stiff, raw skin into supple, wearable leather. Ah, yes, the brains. As you recall, after skinning the deer, you had also removed its head. Within the skull was another treasure trove for the hide worker. Every animal, it is said, has enough brains to tan its own hide. The deer's brain, mashed and mixed with a bit of warm water, would create a slippery solution full of oils that could be worked into the hide after the initial drying stage. That would come later, but the elder had already set the deer's head aside, knowing you'd make use of it soon. For that night, the main task was to smoke and dry the hide a bit. You staked the hide, now treated with bark and ash, near the fire, propping it up on sticks so that the heat and smoke could circulate around it. The pungent smell of burning green, wood intentionally chosen to make a lot of smoke filled the air. Smoke would help keep insects away and start the curing. As the hide hung there, you finally allowed yourself to rest, slumping down by the fire's edge. Your friend passed you a water skin and you drank deeply, the cold water soothing your parched throat. Another member of your group, a young girl, handed you a strip of dried meat which you chewed on gratefully. Your mate sat beside you, eyes shining with pride and relief. She draped a fur over your shoulders to ward off the night's chill, one of the very furs you had provided last year. As you ate and regained strength, the two of you spoke in low voices about the plans for this new hide. It was big enough to make a new cloak for your mate, whose old cloak made from a similar deer taken years ago was beginning to show its age, with patches and thin spots that no longer kept out the cold as well as they should. With winter coming, she needed a reliable coat, especially to keep the baby warm when she carried the little one against her chest. You agreed that this fresh, thick hide, once fully tanned and softened, would be perfect for that purpose. Perhaps there would even be enough scraps left to craft a pair of mittens or patch the knees of your son's trousers, which had been wearing thin from his constant outdoor play. As the stars turned overhead and dawn was still a long way off, you eventually drifted into an exhausted sleep beside the comforting blaze of the communal fire. Around you, the camp was peaceful some, others already asleep. A couple of night watchers tending the flames and keeping ears open for dangers. In your sleep, you likely dreamed of running deer and warm fur. In the days that followed, the hide went through its slow transformation from raw skin to usable material. Under the elder's guidance, and with many hands helping, the process was almost ritualistic. First came more drying. The hide, scraped and salted, was stretched on a wooden frame built from long, flexible willow branches. Laced tightly with rawhide cords through slits near its edges, it formed a taut canvas that could be propped near the fire. Each day, you or someone else would scrape it again gently, removing additional dried tissue and working the oak bark's tannins deeper into the skin. After about a week, the hide stiffened as it dried out completely a rawhide board, hard as wood. But this was only a stage. Next came the softening phase. The deerskin was taken off the frame and soaked briefly in warm water mixed with the mashed deer brains. You recall the somewhat rancid, fatty odor of the brain mixture, and the slippery feel of it as you helped to knead it into the hide. The elder massaged it thoroughly, ensuring every fiber of the skin drank up the emulsified oils. This would prevent the hide from becoming stiff when it dried, turning it instead into something flexible and buttery soft. Once thoroughly soaked in the brain solution, the hide was wrung out, and then the real labor began. Hours of pulling, stretching, and working it to break the fibers. You and your mate took turns at this, sometimes even biting the edges and tugging with your teeth a trick to soften stubborn areas, much like you've seen older hunters do with leather cords. Indeed, you remember the taste of that hide on your mouth, a bitter, smoky flavor as you chewed along an edge to test its suppleness. It's no wonder that your front teeth, like those of others in your tribe, are worn flat from years of such work-a-fact that future scientists might puzzle over, never realizing it was from making clothes like these. Little by little, the deer hide changed. What started as a heavy, cold piece of raw skin became, through sweat and effort, a large piece of velvety, soft buckskin leather that could bend and fold without cracking. It was still a rich brown on the fur side, with thick winter fur intact, but now the inner side was a suede-like leather, clean and ready. As a final measure, you held the hide over a smoldering fire of rotten wood. the kind that makes a lot of smoke but not too much flame. The smoke imparted a lingering scent and further preserved the leather with compounds that would resist mold and decay. It also gave the hide a gentle golden hue on the inside. When all was done, you had a magnificent pelt to work with, the fur shining and the leather strong yet soft. And work with it you did. With winter drawing nearer, you and your mate, and indeed the whole camp, devoted many evenings to sewing and assembling garments from all the hides gathered during autumn. The communal cave that served as your winter quarters was gradually being filled with the supplies of the harvest season piles of nuts, smoked meat, bundles of dried herbsand among these, stacks of furs, and rolled hides ready to be cut and sewn. One cool evening after the first frost whitened the grass, you sat by the fire inside the large cave, the same cave you now occupy on this stormy night. By flickering firelight, you and your mate laid out the fully processed deer hide. With pieces of charcoal, you sketched lines on the suede side, marking shapes for what would become a new winter coat sized for her. The design was simple but clever, learned from years of practice and patterns passed down from elders. 2 large pieces for the front and back, cut generously to overlap and wrap around the body. 2 long pieces for sleeves, and a shaped piece for a hood that could be attached later. Because the hide was big, you could cut the coat in one piece that would fold over the shoulders, minimizing seams where wind could penetrate. Using a sharp flint flake like a knife, you cut the hide according to the outlines. The sound of the blades slicing through the leather was a gentle scraping noise, and occasionally a tougher bit near the edges where the hide was thicker took an extra sawing motion. Once the pieces were cut, your mate took up the bone needle and sinew thread. The needle was Prisiusa, slender sliver of reindeer bone, with a drilled eye one of only a few in the group, as such fine tools took great skill to make and could snap if used carelessly. She had a talent for sewing, her fingers nimble and sure. By the light of an oil lamp, a carved stone bowl in which a bit of deer fat fed a smoldering wick of moss, she began to stitch the pieces together. You watched her push the needle through the leather, threading the sinew that you had harvested from the deer's tendons to bind hide to hide. The sinew, once dried and pounded, turned into tough fibers that, when moistened, became flexible thread, and when they dried again in the seam, they shrank to tighten the stitch like nature's glue. Each stitch was a small miracle of engineering, looping and locking the hides so that not even the cold wind could find a gap. While she sewed the main coat, you started on another task, fashioning the scraps and remaining pieces of the hide into smaller items. The 2 front leg portions of the deer hide, where fur and leather were intact, you envisioned as a pair of mittens. By cutting them, with the fur retained on the inside, you could create mittens that would slide over a hand and keep it as warm as that living deer had once been in winter. Similarly, some other offcuts could reinforce your son's pants or become pouches to carry hot coals on journeys. As you worked, an older man in the group sat near you, carving holes in a piece of antler. Curious, you asked what he was making. He explained it was to be toggles fasteners for the coat. He whittled small cylindrical pieces that could be sewn onto one flap of the coat and pushed through a loop on the opposite flap to hold it closed. You nodded, appreciating the detail. A coat is only as good as its closures. Without a way to keep it shut tight, it's just a loose blanket. With a grin, he also held up a polished piece of horn he'd been shaping into a needle. "More hands sewing, more clothes ready," he said, passing it to your friend, the one who hunted with you, who was waiting for a tool to start stitching his own projects. The cave was alive with industry. Looking around, you could see several clusters of people engaged in similar work. One woman was mending an older fur blanket, replacing a torn patch with new rabbit furs. Another was carefully piercing holes along the edge of a hide to thread a cord through, perhaps making a simple overshirt. Children sorted bone awls and needles and rubbed fat into finished leather garments to make them water-resistant. All of this was accompanied by soft chatter and the occasional laugh preparations for hardship, yes, but also a time of togetherness and shared purpose. At one point, the elder woman came by to inspect the nearly completed coat your mate was sewing. She admired the even stitches and the clever addition of an extra strip of fur around the neck area. A good coat for the coldest days, she remarked. She held the garment up, and you saw how the firelight danced on the rich brown fur on the outside. Before long, this hide that was running in a valley on a deer's back just weeks ago would be wrapped around your beloved as she carried your child through the snow. The thought filled you with both pride and humble awe at the interplay of life. The deer's end was your family's continuance. Before declaring it complete, your mate took a small chunk of red ochre pigment from the group's small store of pigments, a soft red stone, and ground it into powder. With her fingers, she gently rubbed ochre along the edges of the coat in a simple pattern of lines and swirls. The reddish tint stood out subtly on the tan leather, a bit of decoration, and perhaps a blessing for good fortune. Even in these austere times, a touch of beauty and symbolism on a garment is appreciated by all. Finally, the coat was finished. Your mate slipped it on, and everyone watched as she turned around with a smile. The coat draped to her knees, overlapping in front, with the antler toggles neatly holding it closed at the chest and waist. The hood, lined with the softest fur from the deer's neck ruff, framed her face. She lifted the baby and tucked the little one against her, within the coat, demonstrating how she could shield the child from cold while keeping her hands free. It worked perfectly, mother and infant nestled together in that warm envelope of fur. There were murmurs of approval around the cave. But there was no time for lengthy celebration. Other tasks awaited. You too tried on the mittens you'd fashioned, wiggling your fingers inside the snug, furry interior, and hung them by their connecting cord around your neck. They would be at the ready whenever you needed to venture out. Your own outfit, largely prepared the year before, needed only minor repairs and reinforcement. You added an extra strip of fox fur around the edge of your hood, remembering how last winter frost would gather there from your breath. Perhaps this wolverine fur your friend traded with a northern hunter would do even better, he claimed. Frost doesn't stick to it as it does on other pelts. You sewed a band of it around the hood. It tickled your cheeks, but you knew that when you exhaled into the cold, the moisture would not freeze solid on wolverine fur, keeping your face drier and warmer. Piece by piece, stitch by stitch, you outfitted your family for the deadly winter that was to come. The children got new boots from sealskin, traded from a group that lived by the great frozen Rivera material, both tough and somewhat waterproof when oiled with animal fat. Over their shoulders went small capes of rabbit fur lighter and more flexible for their playful movements, but still warm. Every member of the band had something to contribute and something to receive from this collective effort of making winter clothing. You recall one evening near the end of autumn where all of you gathered to assess the preparations. Outside, the first true snowstorm of the season had blown through, leaving drifts at the cave entrance. The world beyond had transformed into a white expanse, and the air had a sharp bite even during the day. Inside, however, the fires blazed, and you and your companions were trying on the full array of winter gear. It was almost like a celebration, everyone alive and together, geared up like bears and wolves themselves in layers of fur and hide, stomping and laughing as they tested their mobility in the new garments. An outsider peering in might have thought a strange pack of beasts was dancing in this firelit cave, seeing all the fur-clad figures. Yet, as jovial as that scene was, no one forgot the seriousness beneath it. Each new garment was poked and scrutinized by others. Are the stitches tight? Will the wind get through here? Did you line those boots with enough grass? There was a shared understanding that these items were not mere clothes, they were lifelines. A poorly made seam could mean a frostbitten patch of skin. Sloppy boot construction could mean wet feet, then blackened toes. So adjustments were made. A seam was reinforced with an extra line of stitching. More insulation was packed into hoods and boots. Someone fashioned simple gaiters wrappings for the lower legs out of old scraps, to tie around ankles and shins for extra warmth, where pants met shoes. Even spare hides were cut into strips to have on hand for emergency repairs or to tie around anyone who needed an extra layer in a pinch. By the time the first truly frigid winds blew, you had confidence that as long as everyone wore these carefully crafted clothes and stayed smart about exposure, You could face what the winter would throw at you, and not a moment too soon, for the deadly cold did arrive in earnest. The days shortened to mere hours of weak daylight. The sun, when visible, hovered low in the sky as if too weak to climb higher, and the temperatures dropped until the earth itself felt like iron beneath a thin crust of snow. That brings your mind back to the present, back to the heart of winter. You open your eyes, blinking at the dim orange light of the fire in your cave. The storm's howl at the cave's entrance reminds you that all those preparations were absolutely necessary. Without the hunts and tanning and sowing of the autumn, this icy night might have been your last. Instead, here you are, alive, relatively warm, and even comforted by the knowledge that you did everything you could to ensure your family's survival. Your fingers absent-mindedly trace a seam on your cloak as you fully return from the flashback. The stitches are tight, and even your mate's handiwork, perhaps overseen by the elder. The sinew thread has hardened in place, as strong as the bonds of family that surround you in this sheltered haven. The fur on the cloak's exterior, once the outer coat of that mighty stag, is long and shaggy, excellent for repelling snow. If you look closely, you can even see a few decorative touches. Along the hems, small tassels of leather and beads of antler and wood dangle. They serve no functional purpose for warmth, but they carry meaning. Each bead was carved to represent something, perhaps a successful hunt or a spirit the wearer invokes for protection. Your mate added those, stitching them in with care, because even in the fight for survival, your people do not forget to add a bit of artistry and soul to their creations. You notice one bead in particular, shaped from a piece of mammoth ivory traded from far travelers. It's etched with a simple pattern of a sun, meant to symbolize hope that the sun will return strong after the winter. You rub it between your fingers, feeling its smooth, cold surface and the grooves of the carving. This small adornment, sewn onto your cloak, is a reminder that these clothes are more than mere utilitarian items. They are part of who you are, an expression of culture and belief. In a way, they tell a story. The story of how humans, without fur or claws of their own, borrowed from the animals and the earth to survive and even find beauty in the harshest season. The memories fade as the present moment asserts itself once more. The storm outside is still blowing, but perhaps it has lessened slightly. You notice the howling has dropped to a low moan, and the furious flapping of the hide at the cave entrance has calmed to an occasional rustle. It might be a lull, or the storm might be blowing itself out. Either way, you feel a sense of responsibility tugging at you. There are chores that cannot wait indefinitely, even for the weather. The water supply, for one, must be replenished by melting snow, and it's best to gather the clean snow while you can. If the storm breaks soon, you'll also want to check the snares you set just beyond the tree line 2 days ago, in case any rabbits or ptarmigans have been caught. In these lean months, every bit of food counts, and the furs of even small game are useful for patches or extra linings. You decide to venture outside. Carefully, you ease yourself up from your warm spot by the fire, mindful not to wake your mate or children. You step over the sleeping forms and reach the cave wall where spare clothing and gear are hung on peg-like rocks and branches wedged into crevices. By the faint glow of the coals, you find what you need: a broad belt to secure your cloak, a pair of snow goggles carved from reindeer antler to shield your eyes from the snow glare, a recent gift from a neighboring tribe, invaluable in bright snowy days, and a spear for protection just in case the storm's quiet has lured any predators close. As you don your gear, your eldest son stirs from his sleep. His wolf pelt cloak slips off his shoulders as he sits up, blinking drowsily. "Father, are you going out?" he whispers, careful not to wake the others. He is at the age where curiosity and a sense of duty burn in equal measure. He wants to help, to be brave like the grown hunters. You consider for a moment. The conditions are harsh, but you also remember being his age, yearning to prove yourself and learn by doing. Nodding, you motion for him to join you. but you make sure he bundles up properly. Together in silence, you both prepare, communicating mostly through gestures honed by necessity when quiet is needed. Though right now silence isn't strictly necessary, it's just a habit formed during hunts. Your son pulls on his heavy outer tunica patchwork of furs from fox and goat, lined with soft hair fur on the inside. It's a hand-me-down from one of the older youths, tailored a bit last fall to fit him. He cinches it at the waist with a thin leather belt. Over his head goes a hood attached to the tunic, edged with bits of fluffy Arctic hair fur that will help keep snow off. He then sits to tug on his boots, sturdy reindeer, hide moccasins that rise to mid-calf, laced tight with sinew. Inside, you know he has stuffed those boots with dried grass and a scrap of felted wool you bartered for during summer, a rare bit of textile, felted from animal hair. His boots will keep his feet dry and warm, unless he steps in deep slush, which is unlikely on this frigid morning. Finally, he slips his hands into mittens, hanging from his neck-simple mitts you made from rabbit fur for him. He looks to you with bright eyes, eagerness barely contained. You lean in and quietly remind him of the seriousness of going out. Stay covered. Keep your face tucked in your hood. Do not wander too far from me. He nods solemnly, the excitement in his eyes tempered by understanding. This is no mere playful romp in the snow. This is a venture into a realm that can kill the unprepared within minutes. Together, you approach the cave entrance. You both lower your fur visors, those snow goggles with narrow slits to see through over your eyes, preventing snow blindness when daylight reflects off endless white expanses. You're not sure if the sun is up yet behind the storm clouds, but better to be safe. For now, the world beyond is still dim and swirling with snow. You pull aside the heavy hide curtain. Instantly, a blast of cold air claws at any gap in your clothing, seeking entry. You feel it bite at a sliver of exposed skin on your cheek that your hood didn't cover. You quickly adjust the hood, pulling it forward and tightening the cord around your neck to seal in warmth. Your son does likewise, imitating your movements. The two of you step out into the pale, swirling dawn. The outside world is a chaos of white and gray. Snow continues to fall, but lighter now fine icy grains, riding on a breeze that carries the last sighs of the storm. A drift has piled up against the cave entrance, and you have to shoulder through it, snow crunching and compacting under your weight. Immediately, you note how your fur-clad body reacts to the environment. The outer layer of furs catches the snow that blows against you, but none of that wetness reaches your skin. Instead, the snow dusts off or clings superficially, soon to be shaken off. Your boots sink a little into the powder, but the hide and fur keep the cold moisture from your feet. Inside, your toes remain cozily pressed in their bed of grass insulation. On your hands, the mittens envelop you in warmth, so that when you flex your fingers, you feel only slight chill, nothing debilitating. Your son trudges beside you. He gasps softly as the cold greets him, but then he steels himself. You notice him pulling his scarf a length of woven wool up over his nose within the hood to protect his face further. Good. You taught him that. Exposed flesh, especially on the face, can freeze quickly in this sort of intense cold. Already, the lightening sky suggests dawn is breaking, revealing the aftermath of the tempest. The familiar landscape has been reshaped into strange new forms. Humps and contours of pure white hide what used to be bushes and rocks. The pine and birch trees near your cave are bowed under the weight of fresh snow, their branches glittering with ice. In the distance, a vast blanket of snow covers the valley where you hunted in fall. It looks tranquil now, belying how deadly it would be to wander out there unprotected. The air is painfully cold on any bit of skin that's not covered. You feel a prickling on the small area of your cheeks around your eyes, where even the hood and scarf don't fully reach. Instinctively, you keep your face angled downwind and periodically scrunch your face, wrinkling your nose, an old trick to keep blood flowing. Your son mimics you, scrunching his face inside his hood. It's almost comical, and despite the gravity of conditions, you find a smile tugging at your lips. Out here in the brightening, snowy morning, clad in your furs, you both look like strange winter animals. First order of business, gathering snow for water. A few paces from the cave mouth stands a large flat stone that you use as a sort of table or platform. Last evening, during a calmer moment, you had set out several wide hide sacks there, hoping to collect fresh snow. Now, they are heaped and overflowing. You brush off the top layer of snow to remove any debris or the initial bits that might have caught soot from the fire smoke wafting out earlier, and then pick up one sack. It's simply an old hide, stiffened into a bucket shape. You hand another to your son. Together, you scoop clean snow into the sacks until they are full. The snow is light and powdery. You know it will melt down to a fraction of this volume, but you can always come for more. The effort is quick work, and thanks to your layered gloves, you actually wear a thin leather underglove within the mittens for moments when you need a bit more dexterity. Your hands do not freeze in the process. Your son uses his mittened hands like shovels, giggling a bit as he does, so the snow is almost weightless, and for a moment he's enjoying it as any child would enjoy scooping up piles of fluff. With the sacks filled, you carry them back and place them just inside the cave's entry, where others can fetch them to melt by the fire. This way, you minimize how much cold air you drag deeper into the cave. Next, you decide to check the snares set in the tree line about 100 paces from the cave. Before heading further out, you take stock of conditions. The wind has indeed subsided, now a gentler breeze, but the cold is intense. Your breath emerges as thick clouds through the small opening of your hood and scarf. Those clouds immediately crystallize, and tiny ice flakes fall on your fur ruff. True to expectation, the wolverine fur trim on your hood doesn't collect the moisture. The frost doesn't seem to cling, while on your son's hood edged with hair fur, you see a bit of white frost forming. You gently brush his hood with a mitten to clear it, reminding him softly, "Keep moving your face and brushing off the ice." He nods. The path to the snares is not really a path now, just an idea, somewhere beneath the featureless snow. But you know the terrain well from years of living here. You lead, lifting your knees high to tromp through drifts. In some places, crusty layers of older snow support your weight for a second, before crumbling and plunging you shin deep. It's tiring work. Before long, you feel warmth building inside your garments from your exertion. A bit of sweat starts to form on your back under the multiple layers you wear. Immediately, you remember a lesson from the elders. Sweating too much in this cold is dangerous. If your inner clothes get damp, that moisture can freeze or at least make you lose heat rapidly once you stop moving. So you moderate your pace, slowing a little, and even pause for a moment under a tree. You catch your breath, inhaling the dry, cutting air slowly so as not to cough. You lift your arms slightly and feel coolness slip in under your cloak as it billows. This helps vent the heat. It's a careful balance. Stay warm by moving, but not so warm that you perspire heavily. Your son is breathing a bit hard but managing. You put a hand on his shoulder through his thick coat and give a reassuring squeeze. He smiles, eyes visible as crinkles behind his snow goggles. For him, this is an adventure, and you are mindful to make it a learning one, not a terrifying ordeal. After the short rest, you carry on. Soon you reach the stand of shrubs and young trees where you had set 3 snares. These were simple traps, loops of braided fiber or sinew set at rabbit, running height, meant to snare the neck or foot of an animal following its habitual path. You approach the first one, tied between a forked branch and a stump. The snow around is disturbed. Your heart quickens. Indeed, the branch that serves as a spring for the snare is bent, indicating something triggered it. You gently brush aside the snow and find a dead hare, half suspended by the snare cord. Its fur is white in winter morph, making it almost invisible against the snow, but the telltale shape and the bit of blood at its neck give it away. Quickly, you kneel and free the hare from the snare, unwinding the sinew loop from its neck. It is frozen, stiff, already likely caught during the night while the storm raged. The body is cold and rigid in your hands. You silently offer thanks to the animal's spirit, as is custom. Your son crouches next to you, excitement in each foggy breath. He reaches out to touch the hare's thick fur. Careful, it's frozen solid, you whisper. He marvels at how the hare's fur blends into the snow. You explain softly that this beautiful white coat is why the hare survives out here and, ironically, now it will help us survive, providing a small meal and a warm pelt. The boy nods, understanding the dual nature of things. You slip the hair into a leather pouch at your side. The fur will be useful. Even one hair can line a glove or make a warm hat lining if you gather enough. And the meat, though scant, will add a bit of fresh protein to your stew tonight. You move to the next snare. It's empty, the noose still open, lightly crusted with ice crystals. No tracks around it besides a thin drift of snow. Nothing there. A third snare, near a fallen log, however, holds another surprise. The area is heavily trampled. At first, you worry a large animal might have raided it, but then you spot feathers scattered, and under the log, the snare line is pulled taut. Gently, you tug, and out comes a Grousa ptarmigan, its plumage winter white, but with a smattering of brownish spots. The bird is ensnared by the foot. It likely got caught and thrashed, causing the commotion in the snow and shedding some feathers, but ultimately succumbed either to injury or cold. It's lifeless now, eyes glazed and tiny body frozen like the hare. A bird, your son exclaims softly. Birds are trickier to catch in winter, but ptarmigan often burrow into snow for warmth and might stumble into a snare placed along their roots. This is a good find. You remove it from the noose and carefully smooth its white feathers. They are dense and thick, excellent insulation. In fact, you recall a piece of knowledge the elder once imparted. Sometimes people pluck such birds and stuff the feathers into their clothing for extra insulation. You might do that with some of these feathers, though a ptarmigan isn't large. Every bit can help line a pair of mittens or a child's boots. The bird itself will be eaten. Its meat is scant but will flavor broth nicely. 2 catches out of 3 snares better luck than you expected on a stormy night. Perhaps the storm worked in your favor, driving these creatures into your traps while they sought shelter or stumbled about in the blizzard. With the hare and bird collected, you decide not to push your luck or your endurance by going further. The horizon to the east is glowing brighter through a gap in the clouds. Morning sunlight will break through soon, and when it does, it will reflect blindingly off the fresh snow. It will also signal a deep drop in temperature. On is sometimes the coldest moment of the day. You turn back towards the cave, the promise of warmth drawing you. The return walk is slightly easier, as you can follow the trough of your earlier footsteps. Still, by the time you see the dark mouth of the cave ahead, the first rays of sun are peeking out, painting the high clouds with pink. The world around sparkles. You pause for a brief moment with your son to admire it. The storm has ended, and a pristine new snowfield lies before you. Icicles hang from tree branches like ornaments. Even the air has a quiet hush, as if the whole land is catching its frozen breath after the night's fury. It's breathtakingly beautiful, and utterly hostile at the same time. Without your furs and hides, you'd be an intruder here. A nearly hairless ape doomed to perish in minutes. But wrapped in your winter regalia, you belong in this picture. Moving through the glittering morning like a fur-clad spirit of the cold. You take this chance as a teaching moment for your son. Look, you say, pointing with your mitten to a set of tracks on the snow's surface near the tree line. He squints, then recognizes them. Fox tracks. Fresh from just after the storm, a red fox likely slunk by, perhaps sniffing at your snares or investigating the smell of the caught grouse. You see that the fox dug a little where the bird had flapped. Maybe it tried to get the trapped prey and ran off when you approached, or gave up because of your clever trap tying the catch under the log. The fox's own fur would keep it warm enough to be out at dawn. You follow the tracks with your eyes, until they disappear into the brush. Your son comments, "The fox will be hungry." You nod and half smile. "Maybe we saved our bird from him, or maybe he will catch another soon." The fox's fur in winter is luxuriant. You think briefly of how valuable a fox pelt is for trimming hoods or cuffs, but that fox is gone, and you didn't see it. Another time, perhaps. Approaching the cave, you feel a chill creeping deeper now that you've stopped walking and are carrying extra weight, the hare and bird. Your earlier sweat has cooled. You quicken your step, eager to get inside before that sweat becomes an icy chill against your skin. Your son, too, is stumbling a bit with fatigue. His shorter legs had to work twice as hard in the drifts. You reach the entrance, and both of you stamp the snow off your legs. A lot of it falls off easily thanks to the outer fur layers, which don't let it melt immediately. You brush each other down with your Metensa flurry of white powder dusts off from hoods, shoulders, and backs. This is important. You've learned not to bring loads of snow inside, where it will melt and dampen things. Once relatively clear of snow, you duck back through the hide curtain into the cave. Immediately, the air feels warmer, though still chilly. It's a relief compared to outside. The cave is filled with a dim morning light, plus the steady glow of the fire which someone has tended in your absence, likely your mate, who now glances up as you and your son return. She had awakened and seen you gone, perhaps guessing your errand. She smiles with relief to see her two frost-kissed adventurers step inside, and with pride as she notices the hare's ears peeking out of your pouch and the ptarmigan in your hand. Your son excitedly yet quietly recounts the finds to his mother, showing off the bird. She gently praises him, cradling his flushed face in her hands for a moment, checking that he is not frostbitten. You remove your goggles and blink, adjusting to the relative dark of the cave. Someone passes you a wooden cup of warm broth. They keep a pot simmering, as is often done through the night to provide hot liquid. You sip it gratefully. The warm, fatty broth travels through your insides, banishing the last tendrils of deep chill. The hare and bird are quickly taken by another member of the group to be cleaned. They'll likely add to today's meals and provide a bit more fur and feather to your growing collection of materials. The morning routine in the cave begins. People stir, some stoke the fire. Children yawn and stretch in their furs. All around, you see others bundling up tuna one stays out of their furs for long. Even inside the cave, away from wind and somewhat warmed by the fire, you all keep at least your inner layers on. Only the face and occasionally hands get exposed, usually. As you remove your outer cloak to sit by the fire, you notice frost on the outside of it, delicate white patterns, where your moisture escaped and froze on the outermost layer. That's good. It means the layers did their job, letting your sweat vapor push outward and freeze on the exterior rather than inside where it could dampen you. Still, you handle the cloak carefully, propping it near the fire, but not too close, to dry out any dampness and melt off the frost. Others do likewise with their garments each day. A few hides hung on a rack near the fire show bits of ice melting off from yesterday's use. Your son shakes out his cloak and lays it near yours. His cheeks are rosy, and he's clearly invigorated by the outing. Your mate wraps a larger fur around both of them, and they settle by the hearthstones to fully warm up. You join them, sitting down with a satisfied sigh. In the dim morning light now filtering in, you survey your family. The baby is awake, nursing quietly at her mother's breast, under that new deer hide coat you made. The toddler, your middle child, toddles over, clothed in an oversized wool tunic with fur edgesa, hand-me-down that nearly drags on the floor but keeps her warm. She clambers into your lap, and you envelop her in your arms and cloak, feeling her small body warm and wiggling against you. She plays with one of the toggles on your coat, the little carved bone piece, babbling happily. In this moment, clad in layers of skins and surrounded by the simple domestic rhythms of cave life, you feel a profound sense of achievement and reassurance. Winter is brutal, but so far, you are holding it at bay. One of your neighbors in the cave, an older hunter, coughs a little as he drinks his broth. You glance over. He's wrapped in a fur blanket and rubbing his hands. You notice the back of his hand has a patch of pale, slightly shiny Skinnan old frostbite scar from many years ago, before he had the heavy mittens he uses now. It's a stark reminder. One lapse in protection can cost a piece of you. He sees you noticing and gives a knowing nod, flexing his fingers gingerly. "Don't worry, just stiff in the morning," he says in a low voice, referencing his old injury. You nod and reflect quietly that in all the years since that incident, he's never gone out without double wrapping his hands again. As the cave fully wakes up, you all begin your daily tasks. In winter, many tasks revolve around maintaining warmth and feeding yourselves. Some of the women and men turn to scraping skins that are still in progress. There are a couple of hides from late autumn hunts yet to be fully finished. This work continues into winter, when you can't hunt as often. You see the elder sitting with one of those partial hides by the fire, slowly working a bone awl to punch holes for stitching. Possibly she's making another pair of trousers for someone whose old ones wore out. You decide to do a quick inspection of everyone's winter gear, as is often the morning routine. You've sort of become one of the unofficial outfit inspectors, partly because you helped make many of these items. You and the elder share this role, ensuring that any damage or problem in a garment is caught early before it becomes a dangerous failure out in the cold. Your own coat is Fineno new tears from this morning's excursion. Your boots you set near the fire to dry the exterior, as some snow did crust on them. You check your son's gear. One of his mittens has a seam starting to fray at the thumb, perhaps from handling the snare and the frozen animals. That will need restitching. You set it aside and fetch the needle and sinew thread. With your son watching, maybe he'll do this himself soon, you quickly reinforce the seam, pushing the needle through the thick rabbit fur mitten and drawing the sinew tight. It's tricky with cold, stiff mittens, but your fingers, though rough and scarred from work, are adept at this kind of fine task. Once done, you hand it back to him. There, good as new. Keep an eye on it, all right? He smiles and nods. Next, you glance at your mate's new coat, though you know it's sturdy since you both made it. Still, you find a tiny area near the hem where a stitch might have missed a small gap. That could let wind in if left, so later in the day when she can take it off for a bit, you'll patch that. Across the way, two younger members are comparing their boot zone. Complains his feet got cold last night. You wander over and examine his boots. They're older, and the fur lining seems flattened. You advise him to replace the old grass stuffing with fresh dry grass and moss, which you have stored in a corner of the cave for that purpose. Also, you see a small crack in the leather sole of one boot toe, doubt from wear and perhaps stepping too close to the fire one time, which can make hide brittle. That crack could let in melting snow or cold air. You tell him and the others to warm some pine pitch, a sticky tree resin, later and seal that crack as a stopgap, and plan to cut new sole pieces when possible to sew over it. The community Listens Veriwan understands that a single person's poorly maintained gear can become an emergency for the group if that person can't function or needs rescue due to exposure. So these checks are welcomed, not resented. Through all these interactions, the sense of communal effort in surviving winter is evident. Clothing what each person wears is almost a communal project. Hides are shared, tasks divided, knowledge passed around freely. It has to be this way. No one person can easily secure and prepare everything on their own, and a failure for one is a risk for all. As the morning advances, outside the sun climbs, brilliant and surprisingly cheery, despite giving no heat. A few children, bundled like little fur balls, are allowed to play just at the cave entrance where adults can see them, to get a bit of fresh air. They tumble in the snow, laughing puffs of steam, but even they know not to stray beyond a certain point. After a short while, they eagerly come back in to warm up, red-nosed and smiling. Inside, you settle down to another important winter occupation, storytelling. While some people work quietly with their hands, an elder usually begins telling stories to pass the time and to teach. This morning, seeing you return safely with your son, The old hunter with the frostbite scar clears his throat and speaks up. "This reminds me of a story," he says, his voice raspy but strong enough to reach the attentive ears around the fire. You and others look toward him, and a hush falls, broken only by the crackle of fire and the distant drip of melting icicles near the entrance. He smiles and begins, spinning a tale. "Long ago, in the time of our ancestors, winters were even colder and darker than now." The children shuffle closer, eager to hear the tale. You lean back against the cave wall, your repaired cloak around you, and listen as well. For even if you've heard it before, these stories bring comfort and wisdom, the elder continues, voice rhythmic. "There was a winter so cruel that birds froze in mid-flight and fell from the sky, and fish turned to ice in the rivers. In that winter, humans were new to this land and did not yet know how to dress in furs. They shivered and nearly died, huddled in caves with only fire. The great spirit of winter saw these poor naked humans and laughed at their weakness. Perhaps these creatures are not meant to survive," Winter said with a voice like the north wind. "Many perished, but a few were brave and clever. One of those was a young woman named Isla. She watched the animals around her and noticed that though the cold was fearsome, the wolves still ran, the bears still lived, albeit asleep in their dens, and the deer still wandered, all because of their thick coats. And so Isla thought to herself, if only I had a coat like theirs, I too could walk in the snow and laugh at the cold." In those days, humans had hunted and eaten animals, but they left the hides aside or only slept on them at night. They did not think to wear them while moving. Ela decided to change that. She tracked a great white deer through the blizzardsome say with no more than a stone knife in her hand, and by wit and courage, she managed to take its life to save her own. She skinned that deer with bare, freezing fingers, nearly losing them to frostbite, but her will was strong. Wrapping the hide around herself, fur side in, she felt the first real warmth she had known outside the cave. It was as if the deer's spirit was hugging her. When the spirit of winter saw this, it was furious. How dare a human steal the warmth of its creatures? Winter blew its harshest winds at Ela, trying to tear the hide off her back, but she tied it around her with strips of sinew and kept it on. Winter sent icy cold to seep into her bones, but the deer's fur guarded her. Ela returned to her people, wrapped in that white fur, and showed them her discovery. Many were astonished and fearful, thinking she might have become part animal or that it was a kind of magic. But when they touched the fur and felt its warmth, they too wanted such protection. So Isla taught them. The people began to use the hides of the animals they hunted not just for sleeping rugs or tents, but to wear in the day. They learned to soften them with brains and smoke as Isla experimented and learned from trial and error. The spirit of winter raged, for humans were no longer so easily defeated by the cold. Winter roared, creating even stronger storms, but humans now had fur coats, and they endured. Winter tried trickery, whispering to the animals to hide or change their coats, but humans grew smarter in hunting and tracking. Finally, the great winter spirit realized these small, weak humans had found the key to surviving its deadly embrace. It respected their cleverness and tenacity. It visited Isla one night as a pale blue frost sprite in the cave and said, "You and your kin may keep your stolen warmth, clever Isla. But know this, each year I will return, and you must earn that survival anew. Should your descendants grow complacent, I will be waiting to claim those unprepared." Isla simply nodded and held her fur cloak tighter, meeting Winter's gaze without fear until the spirit vanished like a swirl of snow. From that day on, so the story goes, we always prepare. We always respect the winter and gird ourselves in the gifts of the animals. Isla became the first keeper of clothing knowledge, and some say her spirit still watches over any hunter who sets out in the first snow of the year, guiding their hands so that the animals whose hides are taken will be used well and not squandered. The elder finishes his story, and there's silence, except for the fire's pop. You glance around. The children's eyes are wide, some of the adults are smiling softly, and everyone seems to feel that sense of connection to ancestors and lessons hard learned. You realize you've been absently stroking the fur of your cloak during the tale, thinking of how many generations perfected this art of dressing for winter. The story of Ela might be legend or have a grain of truth. Either way, it carries a vital message. The humans who came before you learned that survival in winter isn't about brute strength, but wisdom and adaptation. It reminds all listening that we survive by respecting the cold and adapting to it, using what the natural world provides. Your son speaks up, asking the elder, "Did Isla have children?" The old man chuckles. "Ah, some say all of us here are Ila's children, in a way. But yes, the tale continues that she had many, and she passed down her white fur cloak to her daughter, and so on, every generation to remind them of the winter they almost lost. We don't have that cloak today, but we remember in our stories." The children start discussing among themselves in low, excited voices. One says he wants a white fur like that. Another says, "Ela was very brave. I would have been too cold to do that." Their mother laughs and pats them. "That's why we teach you, so you won't be too cold when the time comes for you to be brave." The morning wears on with such exchanges, and outside the sun reaches its peak for the short day. Despite its brightness, the world remains freezing. The inside of the cave grows a bit smoky as more wood is added to keep the fire high, and that smoke in turn helps keep the hide garments hanging nearby subtly cured and insect-free. The smell of smoke clings to all of you, to your furs, your hair, your very skin. It's a reassuring smell, one that speaks of warmth and life amid the frost. Now and then, someone goes to the cave entrance to dump wastewater or to relieve themselves, and each time they go fully clothed, no matter how quick the errand. You see a young woman who had been napping rise to go outside briefly, and she takes the time to pull on her heavy cape and hat. Nobody risks even a minute out there improperly dressed. Meanwhile, you decide to get to a project you've been planning, making a new set of socks or boot liners out of some spare rabbit furs for your toddler. Her feet have been cold at nights, even by the fire, and though she doesn't walk outside in the snow much, you want something on her little feet within her sleeping furs. You take a few of the hair pelts you've been curing by the firesoft, and downyon cut them into roughly foot-shaped pieces, then begin to stitch a pair of tiny booties, fur side inward. It's a delicate task, partly because the pieces are small. Your mate comes over to help, holding the pieces together while you poke holes and thread the sinew. It's a small act of love in a harsh time, ensuring even the smallest member of your family is wrapped securely in warmth. While sewing, you join quietly in conversation with others about practical matters. One man mentions that his cloak has gotten much heavier over the years from absorbed oils and smoke, and might need replacing soon. He's thinking of trading some spear points with a cousin in another band for a fresh reindeer hide to make a new one. Another woman talks about how she braided strips of old fur to make a warmer sleeping mat. You listen and share tips of your own, maybe about how stuffing gloves with thistledown one time helped when you were on a trip. It did, though it was messy. These little knowledge exchanges are part of daily life. Everyone is continuously refining how to best use their gear to cheat death through another blizzard. By midday, a simple meal is prepared, a stew enriched by the very hare and grouse you caught. As the smell of cooking meat and roots fills the cave, you reflect on how everything is interwoven. The clothing enabled you to go out and get food. The food warms and fuels you to maintain the clothing and yourselves. It's a cycle of survival. You eat, thankfully, savoring the hot broth as it spreads warmth from your belly to your limbs. In the afternoon, with the weather clear, a decision is made that a small party will head out to a nearby river to chop ice and fish at a hole, a task done periodically, even in winter, to keep up the protein supply. You are one of those volunteering to go, along with your friend and a couple of others. This will be another opportunity to put your winter wear to the test, but you're confident now in your ensemble. Plus, more exercise will keep you warm. Still, before leaving, you double-check everything. Boots tightly laced, extra fur tied around your waist like a sash for added core warmth, hat securely on, and even a backup pair of mittens in case one pair gets wet while handling icy water. Your mate ensures you carry a small pouch with tinder and a flint in case you have an emergency out there and need to start a fire, one never knows. And importantly, you pack a spare hide as well, rolled up. It's common practice to carry an extra fur that can act as a blanket or emergency shawl if someone gets hurt or if the cold becomes too intense. With the sun out and wind mild now, the trek should be fine, but out of caution, you always prepare for weather to turn. As you and the others depart, your son looks on longingly, but this time you ask him to stay and help at camp. He had his morning adventure. The trip to the river is more hazardous, and not for children today. He obeys, albeit reluctantly, and you promise to show him later any fish you catch. Off you go figures, trudging across the bright white ground, throwing long shadows in the low winter sun. From within your hood, your breath warming your face. You look around. It's almost silent out here, except for the crunch of snow under your feet and the occasional distant crack of ice expanding. The snow's glare is intense. You are thankful for your slit goggles, peering through them at the world. One companion, who did not have such goggles, squints terribly and shields her eyes often. She mutters that she'll fashion some soon. She hadn't realized how blinding it would be after the storm. These are the little things that proper attire covers to not just warmth, but visibility and the ability to function. You make a note to help her carve a pair when you're back, maybe using bone or piece of leather. The expedition to the river and back could be a whole story in itself, but suffice it to say, you handle it with the prowess gained over many winters. You reach the Rivera ribbon of ice with a black current still flowing at its center. The cold there is damp and extra biting, but you all keep moving and work quickly, chopping through the ice at the edges and spearing a few sluggish fish. At one point, one of your companions accidentally dips his gloved hand in the near-freezing water while grabbing a fish. He curses and immediately withdraws it, but the damage is done. The glove is soaked through. In seconds, in the open air, it starts to freeze stiff. He rips it off before it freezes solid around his hand, but now his bare hand is exposed to the killing cold. You all react instantly. You pull out that spare fur you brought and wrap it around his hand. Another person takes off their own outer mitt and offers it as a dry replacement, and someone else helps rub warmth back into his numb fingers. The caught fish flop lightly on the ice beside you, but the priority is preventing frostbite. Within a few minutes, you've managed to rewarm his hand enough and get it into the dry spare mitt. The wet glove is hung on a stick to perhaps freeze dry a bit before you head back. This incident underscores what you all know. Contact with wetness is dangerous in winter, but you were prepared, and your friend thanks you through chattering teeth. You all decide that's enough fishing for now and pack up to head home. By the time you return to the cave with a few fish, dusk is already approaching the weak winter sun, sprinting across the sky and leaving you again to the long night. You're greeted with relief and minor celebration. Fresh fish is a treat. The man with the wet glove is fine now, just embarrassed. That glove, now frozen stiff, is thawed and dried by the fire carefully, to be usable again tomorrow. As night falls, the routine of bundling up tight repeats. Everyone makes sure they're bedding a nest of furs and hydeisis arranged cozily. Under each family's sleeping pallet of hides lies a layer of dried grass, moss, and pine boughs, gathered in warmer seasons. This crunchy bedding adds insulation and a touch of softness against the unforgiving rock floor. It rustles gently as people adjust their positions, finding the most comfortable way to lie amid their furs. You check the hide curtain at the cave mouth, adjusting stones at the bottom to seal it better against the night wind that's picking up again. Lying down with your family, you feel the exhaustion of the day in your bones, but also a deep contentment. In the flickering shadows, you see around you a community at rest, wrapped in fur blankets and wearing their winter hats even as they sleep. One might chuckle that you all look like a pack of animals burrowed in for the night, and perhaps that's a fair comparison. Humans might not have been born with thick pelts of their own, but through ingenuity, you've effectively become creatures of fur when needed. The fire is banked to a low glow to conserve wood through the night. Your toddler curls against you, feet tucked into those new rabbit fur booties you made, and you feel her wiggle her toes contentedly. Your mate leans on your shoulder, the soft fur of her hood tickling your neck. You drape an arm over her and feel the supple hide of her coat under your hand, warm from her body heat. Each layer each of you wears traps that precious warmth, bouncing it back to your skin. Before you drift to sleep, you find yourself reflecting in a semi-dreamy state on how far back this chain of knowledge goes. The story of Isla lingers in your mind, and you picture some ancient forebear discovering the secrets of clothing. You imagine countless generations sitting by fires like this, sharing tales and tips on how to cut a coat or tan a hide better. In that unbroken lineage, you and your kin are one point, one chapter. And far, far in the future, though, you cannot conceive of years beyond a lifetime, humans will continue this tradition. Perhaps they will have even better ways to stay warm. You cannot imagine exactly, maybe thicker furs, or fabrics from plants, or things beyond imagining. But right now, in this moment, you are grateful for what you have. High above the cave, the winter wind sings across the frozen land. It searches for any life foolish enough to face it without protection. But tonight, like last night and many nights to come, you and your people are snug in your second skins. The wind may claw at the rocks, but it cannot reach you here inside your cocoon of fur and community. You tighten your arm around your loved ones and close your eyes. In the darkness behind your eyelids, images flit by. The brilliant snow glare of morning, the gentle face of the elder telling the story, the fierce eyes of the stag you once hunted, the trusting gaze of your son looking to you for guidance, all bound together by one common thread, the fight against the cold. This fight is not won once and forgotten. It's a daily struggle every winter, but it's one you've prepared for and embraced. In a strange way, the winter has a beauty and clarity that you cherish. The cold teaches you to be strong, to be inventive, to work together. And ironically, it's in the freezing months that you often feel the warmest bonds with your family and tribe, all of you pulling together. As sleep finally takes you, your last waking thought is a simple one of gratitude. Gratitude to the animals whose skins you wear, to the ancestors who figured this all out, to the fire that flickers a safe distance away, and to the very clothes on your back. You think, almost in conversation with the winter itself outside, not this year. This year, you won't take us. We know how to live with you. And with that resolve, you slip into dreams. Perhaps dreams of green summer fields, or of running through the snow unharmed dreams, made possible because in reality, you have done everything a caveman can do to survive deadly winter nights, and it is enough. In the quiet stillness of that cave, with you and your family slumbering safely in furs, it might seem like an ordinary end to an ordinary winter day. But there is nothing ordinary about what you and your people have achieved. In a world ruled by ice and cold, you have mastered a technology as essential as fire, the technology of clothing. Each stitch in your hide coats, each bead and toggle, each choice of fur for a particular use, represents generations of innovation and adaptation. Unbeknownst to you, tens of thousands of years into the future, people will uncover pieces of your story. They will find well-worn scrapers with traces of tannin and fat, confirming that hides were carefully prepared in caves like this. They will discover bone needles, elegant in their simplicity, testifying that you sewed complex garments with precision. They may even unearth a child's fur booty, preserved in dry cave dust, and marvel at the loving care evident in its tiny stitches. All these fragments will tell them that prehistoric humans were far from primitive when it came to battling the cold. Modern scientists will puzzle over how our species survived the brutal Ice Age winters. As they put together the clues, they will realize what you lived every day, that clothing was not a trivial matter of modesty or ornamented, was a means of survival as critical as shelter and fire. They will compare notes and evidence, concluding that early modern humans like you wore fur parkas, pants, boots, and layered outfits uncannily similar to those used by indigenous Arctic people in later ages. They will surmise that this innovation might have even given your kind an advantage over other humans, like the Neanderthals, who inhabited cold Europe too, but may have stuck to simpler cape-like wraps. In fact, some scientists will propose that the superior cold-weather clothing of early Homo sapiens was one factor that helped them survive and spread while Neanderthals dwindled. They'll note how certain animal remains, wolverine fur, Arctic hare, fox, and other fur-bearers' hair disproportionately present at early human sites, suggesting those species were valued not for their meat, but for the warmth their pelts provided in winter. They will even study your teeth, should your remains be found, and see the telltale wear on the incisors, deducing that you use them as tools to soften hides to make clothing. In every way, the future will come to respect the Ice Age wardrobes you created. Far from the cartoon image of a caveman in ragged loincloth, they will see evidence of tailored coats with hoods, layered garments, insulated boots, and skilled craftsmanship. In later eras, people will invent new materials-woven textiles, and eventually even synthetic fabrics and clothing will evolve in countless styles. But the fundamental idea remains the same as in your era: to protect the human body from a harsh environment. Whether it's the waterproof fur of a fox trimming a hood in your time, or a modern jacket filled with goose down, the goal is shared across time. And in some of the coldest corners of the modern world, traditional peoples still wear garments astonishingly similar to yours. Reindeer or caribou skin parkas with fur linings, fur-lined boots, mittens connected by strings, layered furs for bedding. The methods and materials you pioneered will carry forward through millennia. For now, though, nestled in your cave in the heart of the Ice Age, none of that future knowledge concerns you. You don't think of yourself as an innovator or a figure of historic importance. You're simply a parent, a hunter, a human trying to keep loved ones warm through the long night. Yet by doing so, by applying hard-won wisdom and careful effort, you are part of one of humanity's greatest triumphs, the ability to live in almost any environment on Earth. The deadly winters test you, but they do not break you. As the fire in the cave smolders and your family sleeps soundly, imagine the camera of history pulling back. We see the snowbound landscape dotted with perhaps a dozen such flickers of warmth, other families and other shelters, all wrapped in the furs of their ingenuity. Overhead, the aurora borealis might dance, green ribbons in the star-strewn sky, unnoticed by those slumbering below. The wind carries on its ancient tune, and so our narrative comes to a close, with you, the Ice Age traveler, the survivor having shown us what cavemen actually wore to survive deadly winters. It was not merely clothes as we think of them today, but a second skin of life, a dynamic blend of tool and art, necessity and culture. Each garment was a story, of the animal it came from, of the hands that crafted it, of the person it protected. In the end, the secret to surviving the coldest winters was never a mystery at all. It lay in observing nature, in patience and craft, in community and sharing knowledge. It lay in the understanding that humans, though born nearly bare, could cloak themselves in the gifts of other creatures and thrive in climates once thought unendurable. Wrapped in fur and hope, you outwit the winter. As the dawn of a new day approaches in that distant past, we leave you resting by the fading fire, confident that you and your kin will greet the morning alive and well. The deadly winter will rage on outside for many weeks more, but you are ready for it just as you were yesterday, as you will be tomorrow. In your sturdy fur boots and snug hide coat, you will step out again into the snow, unafraid, carrying the legacy of ingenuity on your shoulders. The story of what cavemen actually wore is, in truth, a story of human brilliance and resilience. It's a story of you and those like you who refused to surrender to the cold and instead wove yourselves a sanctuary out of skins and sinew. And because of that, the human journey continued through the Ice Age and beyond. So, as our 2-hour journey in your footsteps ends, we modern listeners and viewers can take a moment to appreciate those ancient innovators. The next time we bundle up in a winter jacket or sit cozy under a warm blanket on a bitter night, we might remember you, the caveman, who figured out how to stay warm with nothing but nature's materials and an endless well of determination. We owe a debt to your survival skills. Your eyelids flutter as the first hint of morning light creeps into the cave. Another frigid day lies ahead, but you'll face it as you have all others wrapped in the wisdom of ages, literally cloaked in the successes of your people. Outside, the deadly winter waits. But inside your fur and leather armor, you carry spring in your heart and warmth against your skin. And that makes all the difference.